Well, now, from the rather mathematical aspects of the model, we might come to aspects of the model that are more connected to the social science. Basically, I mean well, even though the model is based on certain assumptions, uh, we those assumptions are not automatically true. So we should actually very well ask to what extent they are true. And the most important question here is why workers allow capitalists to take the surplus value. Um, well, can't they just be self-employed by their own uh, inputs of production, including, of course, machines again, and take the surplus value for themselves? I don't know, do that. Why they basically let the capitalists to take that surplus value? Well, basically, the answer lies with Marx's definition on the conditions of exploitation. So, according to Marx, these are also the conditions of a well-functioning capitalist system. He states two conditions, although there is a hidden third one, on which we will talk more on the um, unemployment and reserve army chapter. Um, so the two key conditions are workers should be free to move. Here, the move should not be necessarily always only physical movement, although physical movement should also be possible. A person should be able to work in, for example, um, Istanbul today, and 2 weeks, 2 years later, that the same person should be able to go to another city, for example, Gaziantep, and work there. Ideal that mobility should be also possible between the countries, of course. That way, the workers will be able to go to the places, to the jobs where they are needed most. Um, so the basically the capitalists, the employers should be able to find those workers. So in order to have them be able to do so, workers should be able to go to them. Uh, so that also means that, of course, the workers should be able to change jobs. I mean, even in Istanbul, I mean, if they stay in Istanbul, the mobility means, I mean, if they work at one workplace, they should be able to quit and or be able to, or it should be easy to fire them, and basically uh, they when they are not needed, and a different workplace should be able to hire them. So they should be able to move from one job to another job as easy as possible. Um, well, of course, the mobility between jobs is also sometimes prevented with long contracts, for example, and also skills that are required and which require long training. For example, even if I want, I cannot be a doctor, which means if hospitals needs extra um personnel, I cannot just quit my job and go to hospital and start work there. So in that sense, I mean, mobility between the medical care jobs and other jobs is relatively restricted, for example. And in that sense, mobility might also very well. I mean, the hospital might just be right next door, or even at the same campus in some cases. Um, but it's still a mobility because I change. I was working at one workplace, and then I moved to another workplace. So workers should be. Workers might also be unable to move. Well, in some cases, when they are bounded, for example, to a village, well, at some locations in the world, I think this still continues. And if you go 100 years before, this was much more common. People were bound to their villages and they were not able to move from there. So basically, the federal lord, which has similar people exist also in countries that non-European countries. For example, in Turkey, is a word which has a similar meaning, especially in the eastern regions of Turkey, but to some extent also western regions. And again, controls the village population and agricultural population and that population. For that population, moving from the agricultural area to the city wasn't easy at the time. And cities were also very close. You need to be, you need to get special permission to go to those cities. It wasn't easy to simply move to the city for a very long time. In addition to this first condition, the second condition is workers should be also free from capital. So they should not have sufficient wealth to control the production. So their wealth level should be small enough so that they should not be able to buy necessary inputs. Note that those inputs include also means of production. And in some cases, for example, if I need to buy a huge machine which will last for years, which I might use for million products or more than million products even, but I need to buy that machine at once. And for that I might need, and initially I might need a very huge actually VAT, which workers might not have. So workers should be free from capital, free of capital, from capital, which they need to buy inputs of production, which they need to produce, make their production as efficient as possible. So their social, even if they try to produce the products with inferior inputs, in this case they are likely to need much longer working time. In some cases it might even be impossible. For example, you cannot produce steel, as far as I know, without proper equipment, which is very expensive. But in other cases, it might be possible, but it might take a very long time. Well, in that case, in order to make if they work alone, alone with the inferior inputs they got, their labor time will work much less than the worth of the same labor power if they work for a capitalist. So I will talk more on this condition in a minute, but basically the third condition is there should also be unemployment. Unemployment is a necessary condition for the capitalist system, also for Marx. Capitalism without unemployment is impossible for him, although that possibility is discussed by some Marxists. We will also see this discussion. But Marx also thinks that capitalism is able to produce the unemployment itself, so internally it produces what it needs anyway. But these two things are necessary for a functioning capitalism and in which workers are exploited. So without exploitation, again, capitalism also cannot exist, according to him. So basically, again, if we talk this condition again, the labor power of the worker is worthless unless he sells it to the capitalist. Think about in the previous part, the carpenter without woodcutter. Now think there is a much more advanced machine which might produce the same table in 1 minute. In that case, or less. In that case, 1 hour 1 hour long labor power of the carpenter with no tool at all might be equal to the 1 minute of social equivalent labor power, or less even. And in that case, that labor power is worthless, even though the worker is not lazy. I mean, he works as hard as he can. It works nothing because the worker doesn't have proper inputs of production. He's not able to buy the proper inputs of production, especially the machines. And that's actually why workers are exploited. That's how capital makes the workers work for them and takes the surplus value. Because if workers don't work for capital, their labor power is worthless. So one question is, what is then the function of capital? I mean, you might think the machines at first as capital, but you might also think in Marxian sense. If you just think machines are certainly useful, and basically their existence makes the production a much more cooperative thing. I mean, it's not now isolated carpenter produces a machine, rather than a bunch of many people should come together, first produce iron ore, then the machines, then use several different machines to produce the furniture, for example. Of course, you also need to produce the other inputs of furniture. You need to produce electricity, you need to produce wood. So, if all of these workers can come together and get the free natural resources and organize the production from very beginning, including all inputs of the production for furniture, in that case, no capital is necessary. I mean, capital is not necessary. You don't need capital who will hire the workers and pay and basically take part of their surplus value. But workers in the pre-capitalist era mostly work at small-scale workshops and farms, basically individual farms. So their ability to come together and organize is very limited. So capital, with its buying power, or ability to buy labor power, and its ability to make production more efficient through technological advancements, it organizes the workers, it attracts the workers, and once workers are attracted and sell their labor power to the capital, then they become organized by the capital, and basically they are actually enforced to cooperate, to be part of a much more advanced production process. In return, of course, capital takes the surplus value. In return, also, the organization of capital itself is limited, because capital is kind of let's say, has its own dynamics, and basically those dynamics cannot be violated by the owners of capital, actually. Every capitalist needs to be basic. I mean, that's the basic dynamic. The first and basic and most understandable dynamic is every capitalist needs to aim to increase their profits to the highest possible point. And that dynamic, that need, let's say, brings other needs. So, in many ways, the production organized by capital has certain limits, certain, let's say, it has a certain structure which is rigid. And, well, Marx very well thinks that actually once the workers are organized, they will learn to work together at first. At some point, they will learn to work to cooperate together for their individual needs without organization of capital, actually. I mean, with workers' organizations and political organizations. And at some point, they will even learn how to run the economic system together. And at that time, capital will be not necessary anymore. And basically, the system will turn to a new system where society organizes